Hey, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us in the next session, which is Flights of the Future. Air travel never looked greener. I'm your host, Mike Lightman. I'm joined today by the wonderful Bill Bruner and the fantastic Steven Snyder. And I think we're just going to dive in. We've got so many really interesting things to talk about. But before we do, why don't we start with just a round of introductions, a little bit of bio, and then we can kick off some questions. So I can do the really quick part about who I am and why I might be qualified to be moderating, and then we can continue on. Hi, I'm Mike Lightman. By way of background, I've been living, working, breathing in the climate tech space for some time. I've been on the startup side, the accelerator incubator side. I ran a venture fund for a short while, and I currently kind of accidentally launched a consulting firm that supports really any myriad of organization that is working in the innovation space, really around climate tech. I think probably the reason that I'm moderating this panel is in my free time, I'm writing a children's space opera book for my son. So I'm really here just to learn about what this industry is and how it works so that I can include some somewhat salient facts in the book that I'm putting together. All right, Steven, I'm going to be picking on you first with my questions. So why don't I actually go to Bill for the intro, and then I can pick on you after that.
Thanks, Mike. I'm Bill Bruner. I'm a co-founder and CEO of New Frontier Aerospace. I was a senior executive at NASA. Before that, I flew jets in the Air Force. And what we're doing now is we're building a renewably fueled hypersonic vertical takeoff and landing aircraft to deliver people and cargo anywhere on the planet to any vertical capable vertiport on the planet in 2 hours or less. So that's me and my company in a nutshell. Over to you, Steven.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Bill. My name is Steven Snyder. I'm the operating principal at JetBlue Technology Ventures. We're the wholly owned corporate venture capital subsidiary of JetBlue Airways. We invest in companies at the intersection of travel and technology, ideally companies at JetBlue or one of our international partners, Air New Zealand, CAE, which is the largest equipment manufacturer of training equipment in the aerospace industry that one of these companies could see itself using. I've been with the team for close to a year, but prior to that, I was in corporate strategy at JetBlue. Before that, I was a airline aerospace entrepreneur at a much smaller scale for a company that never took off, but that we had a lot of fun at. So that's a bit about me.
Brilliant. So just so all of you know, the format of our panel today, I'm going to ask a few additional questions just around their background. We're going to talk a little bit about moonshots in the aerospace industry. Then we'll really transition into the specifics around what it's going to take to become a greener travel airspace. Wow, I'm good at my words. So those are the three categories, at which point we will open it up for questions and go from there. But as this is going on, please feel free to type your questions in and we can just loop them in potentially even before that, if they're better than the ones that I've already written down. So without further ado, Steven, I want to talk a little bit more about JetBlue Ventures. I'm always so fascinated speaking with folks that are at the corporate side because there's so many interesting things that you can do representing the corporate and the VC. So do you mind telling us a little bit more about how you work as a venture fund? To what extent, how are you working with your portfolio companies? What type of support do you do? Tell us a little bit more about just any company that might become a portfolio company of yours.
Absolutely. So, all right, let me start with the ones that are already within our portfolio. We've got about 30 that we've invested in. A couple really jump out from the ESG perspective: Joby Aviation, which I'll get back to in a second; Universal Hydrogen, which is trying to build the fuel systems and the supply chain that'll go toward hydrogen-powered flight and retrofitting of aircraft, which is really exciting. Is maybe only 5 to 10 years away. For all of our portfolio companies, we provide a platform of services that so many of these companies are so small that they don't have the overhead, that this is where JetBlue, as a Fortune 500 company, can step in and provide legal services, marketing, finance help, you name it, any of the benefits that a large company has, that the entrepreneurs who are so focused on a product and so focused on growing a market might not have thought through to that point. 80% of our team is based out in Silicon Valley, which is really great because it allows them to develop deal flow, talk to other entrepreneurs, identify really exciting new companies that are breaking through. But I'm one of 2 team members that's based in New York, co-located with company headquarters, JetBlue in New York City here. It helps us stay really close to what is important to corporate leadership and to the leaders of all the different business units. What's exciting about it is that we get to know what the needs are, what the problem points are, where there's just legacy players that aren't innovating enough, where we can put new options on the table, and partner with these business units, our ESG team, sustainability, for example. We did an innovation sprint earlier this year where we put 150 different new ideas in front of them that really helped to challenge the thinking, but also develop new business partner relationships and hopefully new potential investments for us as well. We try to onboard new portfolio companies that way and tap into the subject matter expertise of JetBlue leadership. So that way, if you have an idea that has to do with a more efficient, better fuel burning engine, I can tap into 5 different leaders at JetBlue who know everything there is to know about engines and everything there is to know about engine maintenance, who can not only be providing feedback on your idea, but could serve on the board one day of your startup and really help grow it into a bigger and better company.
That's awesome. That's super cool. What's your sweet spot company from a stage perspective, from a vertical perspective? Yeah. What do you look at?
Mm-hmm. From a stage perspective, Series A is the sweet spot, but we've got some gray area that will move one way or another. If it's a late seed, if it's an early B, we do pro ratas. So most of the portfolio companies that we're with, we tend to stick through all the way through the Series E or a SPAC, as we've had one of our portfolios SPAC recently. So that was really exciting. From a vertical perspective, our mandate broadly is companies at the intersection of travel and technology. But we've got 5 verticals within there. One is environmentally friendly travel. So that could be anything from short range flying to incorporating carbon credit trading platforms that are thinking about things differently and not just offsetting your flight, but doing it in a smart, environmentally conscious way. There's a lot that we're excited about in ESG. It's one of, there are 4 other verticals, maybe of less interest today, but it's one that we care a lot about and that we've put a lot of energy into.
That makes a lot of sense. And if I'm an entrepreneur that wants to get your attention, what's the best way for me to do so?
Well, so from a tactical perspective of getting my attention, obviously I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on email, follow all of the social media outlets that JetBlue Tech Ventures has and get into our inbox. And we love reading and we love getting back to entrepreneurs who reach out to us. But from a substantive perspective, what really gets my attention and really helps things stand out is a well-articulated value prop that really identifies where that need is from a corporate's perspective or from a customer's perspective. A lot of the technology that we see and that we invest in is B2B or B2B2C. So really understanding what the customer wants, whether that's an individual or a corporation, I find to be incredibly helpful, and how your startup idea really just slips right in there and solves that need. So if you can do a really good job of framing an argument, not only will I think that it's responsive to our needs, but I'll think that you're a really smart entrepreneur too, who we want to spend more time around.
Perfect. Is there anything else that you'd like to share about JetBlue Ventures before I pass the microphone over to Bill?
I mean, just that environment, social and governance, particularly around sustainability, is such an exciting focus area for us right now. We've done a lot when it's come to eVTOL, electric vertical takeoff and landing, helicopters. It's the company that's backed. There's a lot more that we're looking to do when it comes to electric aircraft. There are a bunch of companies that are in diligence for us right now. Sustainable aviation fuel, particularly ones that are doing things way different from everybody else. And I'd say the carbon example that I provided before of not just doing credits, but doing credits differently. So there's a lot that we're excited about, and we want to continue to talk to entrepreneurs and, definitely reach out to us.
That's so exciting. I'm just like tingling with all the really cool things that I'm sure you're looking at regularly. So
it's exciting.
That's so cool. Thank you.
Of course.
Bill, I want to jump over to you now. And you, I don't know another way to say it, you just exude cool. Like whenever I chat with you, you just have this calming aura And you casually drop things like the fact that you were a pilot in the Air Force and you worked at NASA and you've been on all these crazy projects. This is my chance to actually ask you, what's your origin story? Like, tell me about what brought you to this.
So let's see, I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, grew up in San Francisco and Oakland, went to Cal for a while, graduated from San Francisco State in astronomy. Went to go see a movie called Star Wars, and it made me go down to the Air Force ROTC recruiter and say, I want to fly fighter jets. And I ended up at NAV school, Mather, California, then F-111 training in the Southwest, over to the UK, where I flew right seat F-111 fighter bombers, fighter weapons school, a little war in the Gulf, Pentagon, NASA, here. So that's it. So it's been fun. While I was at the Pentagon, I met a guy who's my co-founder now, and he said, hey, you can launch rockets and land them. And then he flew me down to the desert. I think I flew down there with the NASA administrator in 96-ish and saw it fly, and my life changed forever because I realized that these things could be used. You could actually launch and land a rocket on its tail. And I thought, what else could you do with it? So here we are. And we just closed our first contract with DOD. They're giving us a little, about $750K to build the first component of the engine. And we're building a company that's going to carry passengers and cargo, sort of like the 4 first rocket ship passengers who are in orbit right now. Only ours is going to be a little easier because Falcon uses 1 million+ pounds of thrust, and ours is about 300,000. So we can get into and out of reasonably sized airports. So that's my story and how we got here.
And have you always been an entrepreneur or entrepreneurial? Have your roles within the government allowed you to be maybe an intrapreneur, or is this really your first chance to run free?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because you're right. Inside big organizations, you have to sort of, to get things done, be a bit of an intrapreneur. And I've always sort of had a reputation for doing that in government. And since I've left, I've built a small online company, but this is the first hardware thing we've built. But Jess has program managed projects of this size, and I've sort of rammed programs like this through the government. So we've done big things, big complex things, and flown them.
Perfect. So tell me, can you give me the moment or event that was your inspiration for your company?
Standing out there in the desert and watching Delta Clipper fly and realizing it was real. And so what we're doing right now is we're sort of on a march to get back to the desert flying real hardware. So that's the inspiration. That's the short-term goal. Long-term goal, of course, is to turn that into a product.
Now, I've heard you talk about New Frontier multiple times, and kind of in the same way that you very coolly go through your background, you have just such this casualness in saying, we've got a brand new fuel, we've got a 3D printed aircraft, it's going to be able to fly anywhere within 2 hours, do all of these things. And it's clear to me that like you've got the plan for it, right? It's going to happen. Can you, for the audience that might not be familiar, can you give me a little bit of background about what your company is, what you're building, and maybe not the secret sauce, but some of the understanding of how you're taking this thing that literally people say, I'm not a rocket scientist. I'm not a rocket scientist. And you're like, oh no, rocket science is easy. We're going to do it in like 3 weeks. So how are you making it so simple? I think you're muted, sir.
We are unmuted now.
Perfect.
So we are, as you said, using modern manufacturing technology, 3D printing, both for the engine and for the vehicle itself, which makes this all possible, which is why it took 25 years to get from that desert in New Mexico to here.
Well, sorry, briefly, what's the 30-second pitch for those in the audience that might not be familiar? What is your company?
So our company is building a solution to the problem of miserable long distance, mostly trans-Pacific flights, and transatlantic too, because if it takes 6 to 13 to 15 hours to get somewhere, you probably have taken a whole day traveling. We're going to try to boil that down to 1 to 2 hours. And our solution is a hypersonic vertical takeoff and vertical landing aircraft that can operate without a runway and runs on biosourced renewable liquid natural gas. So it's a fuel there's a chain to build it right now. You don't have to do any R&D. We just have to scale the infrastructure. But the California Air Resources Board says that it is the cleanest liquid fuel that you can burn, that actually the net carbon impact of renewable liquid natural gas can be minus 400 grams of CO2 per megajoule. So every megajoule of aviation fuel that we replace, you pull 400 grams of CO2. You could, with the right fuel chain, pull 400 grams of CO2 out of the atmosphere. So we got really excited by that. I mean, that sort of adds to our value proposition. So not only are we going to save you hours off your life, we are also going to pull carbon out of the atmosphere when we fly you from place to place. So that's a pretty good thing to say.
Save hours from everybody else's lives as well.
There you go.
Okay, so I am curious about some of the tricks to the company as well, but for the sake of time, I might save those questions for later and transition into some conversation around moonshots. I want to make sure that we're going to have time for the audience as well. So my first question, where we really talk about moonshots in the entire industry, are what are some of the most significant moonshots that the aerospace industry has seen? Can you share any examples? I think there are probably 2 interesting ones from yesterday. I would guess the Wright brothers, the space race, the moon landing. What are the significant moonshots in this industry?
I'll jump in first, though I know Bill's entire business here is an amazing moonshot and a really exciting one to see in this whole space. It was maybe 4 years ago that we invested in Joby that I had mentioned earlier, Joby. They are the manufacturer of an electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, I should say. It looks like a helicopter, except it's got rotating rotors at the top. So while it takes off like a helicopter, it flies like a plane for about 150-mile range. It's all electric. It's all incredibly quiet. 4 years ago when we invested, prior to me being on the team, I knew that the team was working on this and I thought, this is crazy. There's no way that this is ever going to come to fruition. Now, not only is it a crowded marketplace, but they are the leader in the space and going commercial in 2023. They SPAC'd, they're now publicly traded. And it's the sort of thing that I'm pinching myself that 4 years ago, I would have said, not in the next 10 years, this stuff doesn't seem like it's ever going to happen. And now it's only a year and a half away. I think most people don't even realize that this is out there. There's some statistic out there that I believe 98% of trips that we make in cars are 50 miles or shorter. And you think about use cases for this, like if you live in the Valley in Los Angeles and you're trying to go to LAX, or if you live in East Bay and you're trying to get to SFO, for example, those are difficult trips. They're really backed up in traffic. That's easily an hour to, get across the bay. What if we could do it shorter, cleaner, and more efficient? So you're not doing it by yourself. That's not that far away. We are very close to living in a Jetsons era, where people will have these or be able to order them through apps. So it's the sort of thing that I think a couple of years from now we'll look back and say, how did we not see this coming? Which I think is kind of what a great moonshot entrepreneur should be aspiring toward.
I just want to jump in, and I'm going to completely put you on the spot. So feel free to tell me that you don't have a good answer prepared for this. But looking at something like Joby, what was distinguishing about that as an investment, even retrospectively, that made you or your team understand that this was going to be a winner in the space?
The team and the leadership, and I think some of the other investors that were in the round. I saw that Lisa is in the audience today. Lisa is a partner at Toyota Ventures. That was one of the other investors who we are close with. Jim Adler's on our investment committee, I think it was a really strong signal that there was this mutual interest from our team and their team, because they're incredibly discerning and know a thing or two in this area. And I think that's just something that always happens in venture, that you pay attention to that. I think also the CEO, Joe Ben, is an incredibly visionary leader who is incredibly, just like they say, at first they laugh at you and then they aspire to be you. They take you incredibly serious. He's been working on this for over 10 years. He knows, congratulations, Lisa, premature partner. Me calling you that, as I see in the chat, your first day is in a week and a half. So congratulations on that. But he's such a passionate guy, and it was amazing being there on Wall Street when they SPAC'd, when he's giving the speech before they ring the opening bell. That's every founder's dream, to see that come to fruition and to see the excitement and the nervous but amazing energy coming from him. That was a really wonderful thing to see. So he's incredibly on top of his stuff and a visionary who's also there in the details. And those are things that we really look for.
That all makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you. Bill, I'm going to jump back to you on significant moonshots that you think have been really important just for the aerospace industry.
So Stephen alluded to it, but I would say the period that we're living in right now, it's sometimes hard to recognize when you're in it, but right now at this moment, there are 4 private citizens in orbit, and that's a huge deal. I think we'll look back on that as being sort of like the first passenger flights in the 30s, the Wright brothers in the aughts. This is a huge deal. In between, of course, and important for us was piloted high-speed flight in the X-15. That airplane flew 200 times. I mean, it wasn't quite routine because they didn't quite have the, they dropped it from an airplane. So that mission model probably doesn't work for an airline. But we think high-speed flight, rocket-powered flight, paying customers, anything that starts out as a dream by folks like Bill Boeing, folks like Elon, and then turns into reality. Those are the moonshots. Entrepreneurship matched with technology and the marketplace. Those are the things that move the needle when it comes to aerospace, and it's come to our whole civilization. This is a different world than it was 100 years ago, in large part because of aerospace.
As an avid sci-fi reader, yeah, I think that when most people ask me the business books that I'm reading, I'm like Neil Stevenson or like John Scalzi. I am definitely not the typical business book reader. But I think about some of the books that were written 50, 60 years ago, and a lot of the sci-fi that they're articulating is kind of what I'm imagining will be around in 5 or 10 years from now. So super cliche comment of we are close to living in the future.
Right. And I want to piggyback on that and what Steven said about short-range VTOL. I think short-range VTOL feeds into long-range VTOL, and not to mess anybody's party up, but I think runways are going to be a thing of the past because they take up a lot of room. They're an environmental issue, and that I think it just makes sense and for both civil and military aviation to move in the direction of getting rid of the runway.
I want to put a pin in the environmental downside of a runway and circle back to that in a little bit. But thinking about moonshots a little bit deeper, I think for most of us who are not actively working in the space, either as investors or entrepreneurs, we might not have a chance to be in a VTOL aircraft for quite some time. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the, call it the unintended positive benefits that come from these moonshots? I mean, once again, I think about things like GPS or the new satellite system that Elon Musk is putting up for internet. But are there any others, either historically or that you can imagine will be coming out in the future, that the regular person who's not traveling on some of these cutting edge aircrafts could still receive benefits from the industry?
Pardon me for having the trouble with my mute button, but I want to make sure that you guys don't hear all the birds chirping in the background.
I think they're great.
So the one that comes to mind for me from what we're trying to do is transplant medicine. One of our advisors, our chief medical officer, is an emergency room physician. And the reason he was attracted to our company was that we talked to him about, hearts only last for 4 hours. And that right now with the US transplant system, that half the hearts that are donated in this country actually go to waste. They are not implanted in a recipient because airplanes can't get them from the West Coast to the East Coast in time. Airplanes do kidneys great, but they aren't fast enough to do hearts and lungs. And so it's sort of become accepted that you can only receive a heart or a lung from a circle that's around about 400 miles around your hospital. Well, in the 21st century, that's really not acceptable. And so with hypersonic travel, you can shorten the loop and you can get transplant organs from the West Coast to the East Coast or vice versa in well inside the 4-hour expiration limit. And so we're talking to a transplant institute and they've signed a letter of intent with us. But I think that's going to be a real unintended benefit, both inside national boundaries and internationally. Eventually, you'll be able to source critical life-saving medicines, plasma, transplant organs, aircraft parts for processes that, if an airplane is grounded, can cost you millions of dollars. Hopefully, in the out years, we will be able to deliver parts to solve the MRO and the grounded airplane problem. So those, I think, are going to be the unintended benefits. The world will all of a sudden, I remember, I'm old enough to remember when it took a week for a letter or parcel to get across this country. Now it's same day or next day. Well, that will seem antiquated in 20 years. It'll be that afternoon. If the item from China or Europe is not here that day, people will say, hey, what's going on? This is slow. You mean it's not going to get here till tomorrow? Right? So those are going to be, I think, the positive benefits of this world we're about to enter.
Stephen, I'm curious if you have any additional things that you would imagine our future benefits might look like.
Well, I'll give an example of just fuel is the #1 cost category for commercial aviation. Fuel and labor are the two top ones. So if you go back to take a contemporary example from the 1970s when there was the fuel crisis then, the Suez Canal issues and just trouble in the Middle East, that is the reason why today when you get on a flight to go across the Atlantic or the Pacific, 90% of the time it is on a twin engine aircraft. Because we were able to find ways to really force more fuel off the aircraft. And accordingly, that has environmental benefits to it, that you're burning less fuel each time. It's still not enough. And I think commercial aviation acknowledges its historic role. I think the moonshot for today is going even further than extended twin range operating performance standards and having only two engines on the aircraft, but really to being carbon neutral. We've got a goal at JetBlue to have 10% of our fuel come from sustainable aviation fuel by 2030, by 2040 to be completely carbon neutral. So that means you lay out lofty objectives, and now we'll have to line up the technology that's actually going to get us there. It is the modern moonshot for the commercial aviation industry, and I'm just so pleased that it's taken such high priority within the aviation industry.
So from that, could you potentially give us a snapshot of what the carbon impact right now in the aerospace industry looks like, what the biggest consumers or producers of CO2 are, and then a couple of the solutions? You started talking about some of them, but anything else that really stands out as completely game-changing?
I wish I were a little more technically oriented, so I'm not sure when it comes to the science of what is dropping the carbon into the atmosphere. Obviously, if you take an aircraft and you're at a very high altitude, there will be carbon emissions that come from that. I think right now we are, JetBlue domestically offsets every flight, and we're working toward making it an even larger impact. But I think the question that's going on internally right now is, okay, is it enough just to buy offsets? Is it enough just to support projects that could be on the other side of the planet, that you're doing reforestation in Brazil and China and India and a lot of geographies that we don't even come anywhere close to serving. So we're trying to upgauge the impact that these have, whether it's that we can be doing reforestation projects that are in the Bay Area, in northern New Jersey. So that way, when you get on a flight and they are speaking to you and saying your flight has been entirely offset, let's make it more tangible and real and actually raise that consumer awareness of what's actually going on. Because I think that the general public is starting to hear carbon offsets and they're thinking, oh, that's just an additional cost for my flight. It's just an externality of everything that's going on, but they don't understand the actual value that is derived from it and why it's important to them. I think then the challenge beyond that will be going to a next level higher than that to say, well, not only are we doing this and investing in projects that say that they are doing this, but there's a measurability aspect to it as well, whether it's drone surveillance of the areas that are being invested in, or there's actual atmospheric measurement that's taking place in those areas. So that way we're continuing to push the standards higher and higher for what acceptable carbon trading is.
Understood.
Let me piggyback on that a little bit because, and it really is refreshing to hear a major airline talk about ESG in the way that Stephen talks about it, and their commitment to offsets and graduating to synthetic aviation fuels. And we are seized of that same issue because our goal, initially, is to burn 50% cleaner than the jet fuel. That's where the carbon comes from airliners. And beyond that, to source our propellants, or at least the fuel part, from biosources, and as I mentioned earlier, actually turn every flight net carbon negative. And so we think that's the next phase, which is to not to need to buy the offset, but to actually have the flight contribute to moving the needle on greenhouse gases. Go ahead.
Bill, I think we lost your video. All right. Well, all that makes a lot of sense. Let's jump in. Wait, Bill, was that it?
Yes, I'll have to start saying over because this my button pushes have a 2-second delay. Over.
Roger that. So I want to switch now into the last category before our questions, where we just talk about the industry, the companies, all the other fun nuances and things that are happening. And this is really just the baton pass from the last question, which is, what are the components of the flight industry specifically that make it so prime for disruption? And kind of after that is, what are the barriers that have historically prevented that and might prevent it from happening at the speed that everybody here wants it to take place?
So I'll jump in first, if that's all right, Bill. So there are a lot of legacy technologies in the commercial aviation industry that are controlled by just a couple players. I highly recommend anybody who's listening on this call who doesn't work in the aviation industry and might be a bit shocked by this, the next time you go for your flight and the gate agent takes your boarding pass and scans it, stop for a second before you get on the jetway and take a look at their computer, because it will look like it's something straight out of the 1970s. It is technology that has not evolved an incredible amount. And you would think in a world in which, we're using Hopin right now for this conference, we've got Zoom, we've got Teams, we've got all the Google apps, all Slack and everything else out there. Why has this not moved forward more quickly? I would say a large part of that is that you have very oligopolistic structures in this industry that don't create good incentives for innovation. I think, though, there have been some silver linings. I think some of the OEMs in the aircraft manufacturing space, Boeing and Airbus, they both have their own corporate venture capital arms. We've co-invested with both of them over time, but most recently with Airbus in Universal Hydrogen, the company that I mentioned earlier that's doing a hydrogen fueling system. So it's exciting to see some players starting to wake up and realize that if they don't actually participate in the disruption, they are going to be disrupted themselves. But that's tended to be the exception more than the rule. And we would encourage some of the more legacy technology players in the industry to wake up and to help participate, or else they're going to get disrupted themselves.
Just briefly, that makes me
And
think.
with that as a segue, I volunteer to be a disruptor. I mean, as you can hear from this conversation, we aim to disrupt the industry, and we think, I mean, to be fair, in an established industry like this with lots of safety constraints, it's understandable if there would be resistance to change. And people have made literally billions of dollars worth of investment, not only in aircraft, but in the infrastructure to support them. And so you have to have a fairly compelling value prop in order to make things change. We think we do. But what we hope to do is create a demand signal as customers move to faster platforms. Then that will, and it's the same thing that Tesla did to the legacy automakers, is he's not going to put them out of business, but he's incentivizing them to pursue a much more environmentally sustainable path. They're transitioning to electric vehicles because of they sort of have to, because of the example of Tesla. That's what we hope to do, is that as we demonstrate, as Pan Am did with Boeing and jets, that this is a better way to go than air breathing turbines or air breathing ram or air breathing scram, that passengers and business will migrate our way, and that will help to transform the industry. We'll also create the demand signal for clean burning fuels, again, which will help to move the needle on in the ESG area as well. So that, that's what's ripe for disruption. We think the speed and the environmental impact of the industry is ripe for change.
As you're both talking about this, I think back, I got my master's in Rochester, New York, which is the home of Kodak. And I feel like every course that I took, there was always the case study of Kodak actually invented the first digital camera, and they didn't think it was going to go anywhere. They didn't see the opportunity for it. They didn't invest in it. They didn't pursue it. And now they're just divesting and slowly, I hope there's nobody on Kodak here that's going to be throwing things at me, but they're not doing very well. And I just keep thinking back to that exact thing. But it also brings up a question to me, at least. We've briefly talked about kind of some of the different new technologies and verticals of what the future is going to look like. And I think we'll be talking about that again very soon. Do you see these different players working well with each other? So for instance, the Betamax argument, will there be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5? And of that, there will be one winner, and that's going to define what the future of air travel looks like? Or is there going to be a way for the different types of vehicles to each fill a specific niche?
I'll go first.
Go ahead.
I think you're spot on in saying that different vehicles, different needs. I think in commercial aviation, you have different aircraft that serve different ranges. So while you might take a Cessna to go 150 miles, you need a Boeing Dreamliner if you want to go 5,000 miles. It's going to inform the different technology that is needed, whether it's purely electric, whether it is some kind of hybrid of electric and hydrocarbons, or whether it is completely new stuff that we've not used in aviation before, like liquid nitrogen or hydrogen power. We've used in certain applications, I should say, but I think there's absolutely a complementarity to it. And I think that legacy players should look at how they can forge partnerships and relationships that will keep from being disrupted, because each range is its own different market. For us at JetBlue, a really great partnership to that extent has been JetBlue has publicly announced an agreement with Joby Aviation, the eVTOL company that I'd spoken of earlier, to purchase carbon offsets from them. So these are examples of carbon reduction, not just deferring of carbon, but actually working together with them to create a more monetizable product that they have that suits our needs as well from an environmental standpoint, and can also have greater connectivity should there be a way of working together commercially between the companies. So it's exciting to see how we can be partners in things, not competitors completely.
So I want to fully endorse what Stephen just said, that it's going to be a mix. And as 60 years ago, when Pan Am started the replacement of propeller-driven airliners with jets, we still have propeller-driven airliners. It didn't completely make them obsolete. So for various ranges, various technologies are best suited. So we'll probably have eVTOL as feeders for whatever long distance technology emerges from the battle of the hypersonic, supersonic approaches. And that'll feed into maybe whatever SpaceX launches out of Florida or Texas. And so there will be a range of transportation technologies depending on what the destination is, what the customer need is, what the price points are, and that'll all shake out. I happen to think that people will take electric vehicles to vertical hubs, intercontinental hubs, and that you'll hop vertical from continent to continent. And then there will be another eVTOL at the other end to take you to your ultimate destination. It just seems to me to make the most sense, but I'm prejudiced.
What's your aspirational niche? And by aspirational, it's a completely non-judgmental statement, so much as your strategic or current hypothesis around your perfect fit in this world.
Well, our hypothesis is that we are the 3 to 20,000, 3 to 10,000 mile hypersonic 1 to 2 hour trip, and that ultimately provides high customer throughput and high flight rates and a technological basis for regular hypersonic service between continents. We also think that that provides basis for space travel, because what Virgin's doing with subsonic 747 and launching 2-stage big rockets into orbit, we think you can do that a lot easier with a Mach 8 platform. That's going to require some work, and that's sort of the generation after next for us. But we think the sky is not the limit for these types of vehicles.
And then, Stephen, are there any other types of vehicles that you're thinking about, and other types of specific technologies? I know that we've mentioned a few of them in the call, but could you maybe paint a map for us and say, here's a technology that could fit here. Here's another technology that we see that could go in this space, and give us perhaps like a 30 years out, what might the world look like with the different technologies that are being used for transportation?
Absolutely. I mean, to use one example, the future is electric. I applaud that Cape Air, which is a regional provider in the Northeast and in a few other pockets in the country, has made an agreement with Eviation. So they're going to be going forward with a small, I want to say about 10-seater aircraft, if my facts are correct on this. I believe United was the one who announced a partnership with Heart Aerospace, which is a similar sized aircraft, 10 to 20 seats. So I think we're really just at the tip of the iceberg. The big disqualifier for years and years had been battery density for electric aircraft. It really feels like the technologists have been able to solve this issue. And I think we're really just at the beginning of seeing what electric aircraft are capable of. So we're currently at a place where I suppose the range is around 100 to 200 nautical miles. It's a sort of thing that I expect in the 30-year time horizon to see expand outward and outward, hopefully up to 1,000 nautical miles at some point in the next few years, and hopefully being able to do transcontinental flights at some point within the next 30 years or transatlantic. So we really need stuff that is getting up into the atmosphere and not emitting, or only emitting non-carbon exhaust. So it's exciting that we're not just talking on a whiteboard anymore, that these are no longer just hypotheticals, but players have emerged. I will be excited to see who grows onto that, and whether there are some specific players that can really actually answer some of these medium term of 500 mile to 1,000 mile challenges, because I think that's what gets us really excited right now.
I'm just so energized listening to all of this. Bill,
electrified,
my last question
perhaps.
for you. What's that?
You're energized, but are you electrified?
I'm absolutely electrified.
Okay,
Man, I wish I had more dad jokes. I feel like I should be just like firing them out right now with all the puns. I will try to have one in the remaining 12 minutes. There's my promise to the audience that I will fail. Bill, my last question for you is a two-parter. What is your ideal path to market? And when you look out at the audience that's here today and anybody that might be listening to this in the future, what kind of support are you looking for? How can all of your friends in this space add value to what you're doing? And you are muted, sir.
Thank you so much. So our ideal path to market is to build this engine and start monetizing them, and use the buzz and the credibility from building that engine to build the min viable product, which is about a 12-foot tall vehicle that can travel point to point 800 miles and carry that transplant organ or small parts on a routine basis. We'll test that thing up to Mach 5. And that will provide the technical and regulatory framework that we'll use to graduate to the intercontinental vehicle that we've been talking about during this session. So that's our path to market, and our sort of target markets at each stage. So our beachhead market is engines, and then the next market is transplant organs and hypersonic test bed for the military and other people who need to be able to go to Mach 5 on a regular basis. And then after that, it's cargo and passengers within about 10 years. So clearly it's a big project, hardware intensive, capital intensive. And so we're actually looking to build an army of people who believe in this vision and are looking to help us to implement it, both from a regulatory standpoint, from a legislative standpoint, which since I come from a legislative background, that's my sweet spot. That's what I did at NASA, move big programs through the Congress. So we're thinking about all the things that we need to do to get to where we need to go, not just the tactical stuff of how do you build a turbo pump. So our engineers are good at that and they're working on that, but we're also thinking ahead to what do we need to do to get to the future that we envisioned, that we want to get to. So we're looking for help on all fronts. We're not asking sort of like, write a check for $1 billion. What we want to do
Those are nice too.
What we want to do is build a team that moves forward on all fronts to get to our destination, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. And how are people going to get in touch with you? What's the easiest way? Then I won't ask you more questions and you can stay on mute.
First of all, it's not hop in. So it's either info@nfaero.com or bill@nfaero.com. That's November Fox Alpha Echo Romeo Oscar.com. We are on Twitter at Aerospace New. All one word, Aerospace New. And on LinkedIn use my name. So, and go to our website, nfaero.com, nfaero.com, and we look forward to hearing from everybody. We want everybody involved in this. We're out to save the world. Everybody is, but we really, really are. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I've got one more question for Stephen, but because we're running behind, I'm going to pause the question. I'm going to jump to the audience, and then if nobody has more questions, I'll throw it back at you. But the first one that I see, and my camera's right here, so I'm going to move around to read it, is from my favorite investor at Empire State Development, Clayton Besh, who asks, what about jet fuel from CO2 harvested from the atmosphere? Is it for real?
So I will do a shameless plug for our newsletter first, which I'm dropping in the chat, and will be a nice push of information to you on a regular basis, and obviously get back in touch that way. Clayton, great question. So when it comes to direct air capture, this is a place where I'd love to turn the spotlight a little on Second Muse and Second Muse Capital. which has done a really fantastic job organizing this entire conference. But what I would say specifically is one of the portfolio companies that they've invested in is formerly known as Opus 12, now known as 12. Doing direct air capture. It's happening. It is upon us. I think the big question for us is, will there be platforms by which we can get this into a sustainable aviation fuel, where we're bringing it out of the atmosphere and actually pumping it into aircraft? Now you're not going to a place where it's carbon neutral, but to a place where it's carbon negative, because you're taking what was pollution and you're turning it into a power source, and hopefully one that doesn't actually expel anything out into the atmosphere. So it's a place where we're really excited. It's not a place where we are invested yet, but it's a place where we continue to look for really interesting companies.
Mike, I'm just going to quickly hop in. We're actually over time. We're supposed to end on 20. But I didn't want to interrupt because this has been so amazing. I could do this all day.
Well, thank you both so much for joining me today. This has been fascinating. I've loved it. I plan on staying in touch with both of you, whether you want it or not. And thank you, everybody, for joining. I hope you learned and had fun and all the other things that you should be doing here. Have a wonderful rest of your session today, everyone.
Thank you so much, Mike, for being a wonderful moderator. Bill and Steven, you're the best.
Thank you. Take care, my friends. Bye-bye now.
Thanks.
Awesome.